Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
And I think it's time for the masses to wake up. Wake up. Wake up! Wake up and look at this line they're living in, man!
What's going on, everyone? It's Jeranism back with plain point number 2. Drop it like it's not.
Well, 40 seconds of intro before we get to any substance. Okay. I'm not too hopeful about any substance either. Let's see what we got.
Let's get to the point. Is it true that Earth curves away from us?
Why, yes. Yes, it is.
Well, let's see. First, it needs to be acknowledged that things shrink in the distance. No, not in reality.
Oh, okay. That's a good thing. You've never really shown any skill at talking about reality anyway.
But from the observer's view, things do indeed shrink with distance.
You know, last time you did such a good job using the word appear. Things appear to shrink with distance. You even tried to explain the diminishing angle the image occupies. Of course, you botched it.
So where do we measure the drop of the Earth from? Well, from the observer's viewpoint. Well, now wait. So from the observer's viewpoint, things shrink with distance. It could be said that those things technically drop.
No, it could not be said that these things technically drop. Shrinking and dropping are not the same thing.
Okay, check.
Check? What check? Your last point wasn't even a point.
And we measure the curvature of the Earth by comparing the heights of things from the observer's viewpoint.
Well, that's an oversimplification. Actually, it's such an oversimplification, it's actually become a lie.
So then they must factor in perspective, right? Nope, they drop it like it's not. So let's take a closer look. Let's say that we're looking at the CN Tower, standing 1,815 feet high from across the water. Well, let's say that we also are 1,815 feet high. When we pull out our theodolite or our telescope and we level it, what would we see? We would see this. The spire of the CN Tower would be below the crosshairs. Why? Because from our viewpoint, the tower has shrunk with distance, and the telescope has no idea about perspective.
I'm sure you were all wondering why I allowed him to babble on about that perspective being taken into account, not being taken into account, foolishness a little earlier on. This was the part I was waiting for. At this point, we have to thank Jaren for demonstrating two things. One, that he does not even vaguely understand the concepts involved with perspective, and two, that his demonstration, while not proving a spherical Earth, definitely disproves a flat plane. Perspective only applies when looking at objects at a distance, not a point at a distance. Here, I'll put up a few pictures to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, let's take a look at these two skillfully drawn buildings, each representing buildings 1,815 feet high. When looking at an entire object, like a building, perspective most certainly does apply. As the object moves further away, the angle it takes up in your field of vision is smaller. This is why it appears smaller. Remember Jaren's example, though? He was using crosshairs in a telescope, which tends to indicate we're not looking at the entire object, we're looking at a point. If we're only looking at a point on the target, and the observer and the target point is at the same elevation above a flat plane, perspective does not matter. The crosshairs of a perfectly level telescope, observing from 1,815 feet, would be centered on the target at exactly 1,815 feet. In other words, parallel to this alleged flat plane. And yet, in Jaren's own example, this is not what we see. Since a perfectly level telescope will be centered on a point higher than a distant point of the exact same elevation, the only plausible explanation is that both observer and distant point are not on a flat and level plane. But thanks, Jaren, for once again kicking yourself in the ass.
Take these buildings here, and put a man on top with a leveled telescope looking down the row of buildings. Would he see the same thing as a man on a building, say, twice as high?
What? Twice as high? What the hell does that have to do with anything? You were just talking about an observer with a telescope and a distant point at the same height. You even showed the numbers. And what the hell does twice as high have to do with anything?
Another way to look at it would be to imagine stacking leveled telescopes to the sky. If we peered through the first telescope, we'd see something like this. But if we peered through the top telescope, we'd see this. And if we went even higher, we'd see this.
That's funny. I mean, I know there's clouds in your picture and all, but isn't that the horizon you're showing? Oh, I understand. You're saying that you disagree with all the other flat earthers who say that the horizon always rises to eye level. All right, you should probably let them all know that they're wrong then. We've been telling them that for years.
Again, if we are on a 100-foot building and leveled our telescope, and it was pointed into the distance, say to this building here, even though the bottom block of the building was also 100 feet, our leveled telescope crosshairs would hit higher up.
Yep, and we've already talked about that. But thanks for once again demonstrating that these two buildings could not possibly both be on a flat plane. Oh, and since you love lasers so much, try this same thing with a perfectly leveled laser. You'll have the same results, and lasers are not dependent on perspective. Okay, everything he says after this point can safely be ignored. It's just him denying the reality that he himself helped us to demonstrate.
And the distance between those two marks is what they would consider drop. Is it drop? Absolutely not. You are dealing with perspective. All we need to do is simply observe from the side, and it's plain to see what I did there? That there is no curvature of Earth. And if you only take the observer's viewpoint and forget about perspective, then you'll end up with clever mathematics that mask the fact that where we were all told we live is nothing but a giant lie. Don't drop it like it's not. This has been Jeranism. Till next time.
Told you. Oh, wasn't that fun? If you liked the video, a thumbs up would really help. If there's anything you didn't like about it, I'd like to hear about it in the comments below. Well, thank you once again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.